Yeah.
Okay. Is that full screen for everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me get this out of the way. Got something weird happening here. Okay, so part two. We're gonna do a little recap here. Are you guys seeing the Zoom pictures too, or just the slide?
Oh, we got a
I think-
color wheel.
We've got
Okay.
the Zoom pictures on the right side.
Okay. But you're not seeing a duplicate of my Zoom pictures, correct? You can see the full recap and the views and everything.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
full slide.
Okay, so we're gonna just do a little recap from one. So everybody remembers that hues are the actual colors that we're dealing with, and those can be divided into primary, secondary, and tertiary. And the primary ones are called primaries because everything kind of spins off of those. So we get to the secondary by mixing primaries together, and then we get to the tertiary by mixing primaries and secondaries. Usually on that, the colors are usually poking out, so you get a better three-dimensional sense, but this is good enough for now. And then chroma and saturation. Saturation is TV talk, but chroma is what we use in paints, and that's basically the purity of the hue. So anytime you add anything other than hues, which would be your black and white or gray, you're reducing the saturation of your color. So the closer you get to like something coming off, a pure color coming off of a rainbow or pure light, the more the saturation, and the closer you get into a gray, black, or white with just a hint of color is less saturation. And then we looked at this HTML color picker. Can you guys see my mouse? Is my mouse hovering?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a HTML color picker, and so up here is the highest saturation, and we talked about what we call it when we add black and white and gray to our hues. So up here is your tint. We're adding white to this. Down here is your shade. We're adding black to this, and then this whole big zone in here is tone, which is adding gray to your hue. I'm actually going to take one headphone out here. So yeah, and of note down here, if you go onto the Google, if you just put in HTML color picker, this is what will pop up first. This is Google's variant, and when you pick a color, you can get the hex number here. You can also get the CMYK down here, which is the color system for printers. So if you wanted to dig through your printer ink and pull out these percentages and mix to these percentages right here, you would get to this color right here. So that's interesting to note too. I might play around with that later. So does anybody have any questions from the last one? I thought I'd open it up for questions from the first round and just see if, like I figured people would probably use the forum if they did, but my wife thought this would be a good place to insert her fill the question answer or question asking woodchuck. So does anybody have any questions from what we covered in round one? All right.
I got one if it's not stupid.
I can only tell that if you ask it. I'm sorry.
All right. So with the chroma and the amount of saturation, is that relevant to opacity as well?
No, I don't think it is. That's a good question. It may be tangentially, like if you've got like, a brown piece of wood and or a grayish piece of wood, and then you've got like a translucent color that you're looking through. It might desaturate the color a little bit. I'll have to give that some thought, but it doesn't really have anything to do with opacity as far as I know at this point. But I'm I'm constantly learning, so we'll see. I'll think about that one. So here's a little recap for the what we're going to be going over today. We've got a little bit more to do on color theory. We're going to talk a little bit about the accuracy or importance of accurate lighting when you're doing color matching. We're going to talk about kind of my philosophy of touch-up, which is taking into consideration the original finish schedule as much as possible and trying to recreate the layers like as much as possible to get that layered effect. And then we're going to work on our finish schedule, our first finish schedule on the piece of mahogany that we are going to be touching up eventually. So everybody knows, can you still see me on the camera too? So everybody knows that what we're doing here is we're finishing these up because we're going to drill holes in them eventually, and then we're gonna touch up our boards. So that's kind of like the future of what we're going to be doing. So one of the things I didn't talk about before is value. So there are three things to think about with color. One is hue, one is chroma, and the other is value. And basically value means how light or how dark. When we looked at the HTML color picker, you can have the same amount of saturation but have it be lighter or darker. And basically what that does, if you look at this guy that's going straight down the middle, it's going from black all the way up to white here. And if you notice, the red line down here has more cubes in the red on the bottom at the black value than the blue does. And basically that's because blue is already pretty dark. And if you were to add another block here, it's starting to become indistinguishable from black. So if this was actually opened up on the yellow side, yellow, because it's lighter than red and blue, would have more cubes out to the edge. So the way I think about this, how this is independent from saturation because you're actually adding black or white or gray, is imagine you had 1 drop of blue pigment and 1 drop of white pigment. That would be, and then you had 1 drop of blue pigment but 1 drop of charcoal gray pigment. It would be the same amount of saturation, but it would be a different value. You'd have the same amount of blue interacting with the mixture, but because the charcoal gray would be darker, you'd have a darker value. Same amount of saturation, different value. They also use value to talk about the primaries too. So yellow is a lighter value than blue. Red is a lighter value than blue. So anyway, value. So that gets us to the 3 things. So there's 3 things when we're mixing color or trying to get to different colors. There's the hue, which is the type of color that we're dealing with, or the frequency of the color that we're dealing with. The chroma, which is the amount of purity of that hue, and then value, which I'm gonna just say is like when you're mixing something into it, when you're reducing the chroma, like what that is on the grand spectrum between white and black. So the value is basically how gray, how white, how black. Any questions about that? I feel like maybe I didn't do a great job explaining that, but let me know if any of that is confusing. And if you're not a talking during a presentation kind of person, hit me in the DMs afterwards and I'll definitely get to you. So one thing we haven't talked about in all of this is something that we deal with all the time in guitars, which is brown. And brown is kind of the redheaded stepchild of color theory. There isn't a lot. I did some reading and the art world doesn't seem to like it very much. Nobody seems to like brown all that much. And it's because it's kind of difficult to think about because it's like everything all at once. So brown in some color systems is going to be all of your primaries together. Brown and light, like on your TV, is actually orange plus black. And most colors, you're probably going to be better off mixing your primaries together to get to brown. But basically, brown can have everything in it. It can have all of your primaries, and it can have your black, your white, and your gray in it. Bring around the phone off really quick. So, this is a picture of the Mohawk website and their blend all stains. And they have all different kinds of browns in there. One thing to note about, let me see here. Oops, hold on a second. Can everybody still see the blend all powder stain?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, so right in here is this thing called perfect brown. Now, in Mohawk parlance, perfect brown means a very neutral brown. It's probably as close to the middle gray as possible if they're adding black or white. Mohawk doesn't have a lot of information on their colors, but it also doesn't have any secondary colors to it. If you look, I'm going to move over to this website. Is everybody seeing the scroll? Can everybody see me scrolling?
Yeah, you're scrolling. Yep.
How accurate do the colors look halfway decent on here? Can everybody see what the colors are looking like?
Yeah, I think everything probably looks about like it does on your screen. You can see
Okay.
the whole room.
So if that brown is not super neutral, then it's going to have a secondary color to it. And basically every possible hue can be a secondary color. So you can have a brown that has quite a bit of red to it. If you look at this burnt umber up here, this actually has quite a bit of red to it. You can have a brown that has quite a bit of yellow to it. You can have a brown that has quite a bit of green to it. These aren't represented here. Actually, I'm gonna pop out of this really quick. So anyway, everybody's seen. How many people have worked on old guitars before? How many have seen an old Gibson that actually looks fairly magenta when you hit it with light, or it almost has like a purplish look to it? Or you've seen an old Martin that has kind of like a green tint to it. Basically, these are all examples of different secondary colors. So one thing about like the naming conventions that Mohawk uses and a lot of different people use is if you see a brown that says like brown, mahogany brown, and that's in the trans tint, that would be like your red brown mahogany. Hold on one second. Hey, babe. So anyway, getting used to the idea of what people are talking about when they name their colors is super duper important. That way you have a good idea of what you're gonna like. If I pull out this coffee brown, they're pretty good at describing what's going on with these, but it's probably not going to be a dead neutral brown. All right. So I also feel like I could have explained that maybe a little bit better. Does anybody have any questions about that? Basically the long and the short of it is brown is everything all at once, or it has the potential to be everything all at once. It's why it's one of the most difficult colors to match in guitar repair. You can get to something that looks pretty good, and then it's missing just like a little bit of something, and it's always going to be, you know, just a little tweak to kind of bring it into that next level of color match. Any questions on that? So we're mixing colors, and we need to decide what color we're looking at and what color we're dealing with. Does everybody remember in the first one where we were talking about the difference between reflective, basically the color, the light information reflecting off of the object and telling us what color it is by absorbing certain frequencies and reflecting certain frequencies? Does everybody still remember that? Oh boy, hold on a second. So light, as it's coming off of the sun, it is going through our atmosphere, and it's changing color based on the atmosphere. It's going through the least amount of atmosphere at noon. It's right overhead, and it's coming straight down on us, and it's going to be as white as it's possibly going to be during that time. One of the reasons why sunsets are orange is because it's going through the maximum amount of atmosphere that it can possibly go through when it is going down. So when we talk about accurate lighting, white light actually contains all of the color information that is essentially possible. When you look at like the Pink Floyd album cover, we've got the prism, and the white light is coming in and all the colors are coming out. That's because all of that color information is in that white light. So that brings us to the color temperature of the light that we're using in our shops. Can everybody see the color temperature? So if we look up here, we've got 5,000 K. I wrote a little article on the Patreon a while back about color temperature of lights. I use basically 5,500 K in my shop, and this is as neutral, pretty much as neutral as you can get in a light bulb. I don't know how many of you have done touch-up before, but you've had something looking pretty good in the lights in your shop, and then you take it out into the sunshine, and it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I thought this was looking good. The key to avoiding that is to replicate the sunlight as closely as possible in your light bulbs. And the way that you do that is keeping within this range right here, pretty much anything between 4,000 and 6,000 Kelvin. And that's something that you can find on the package. Most light bulbs are going to come with the rating, the Kelvin rating, if you look at the back. So this is important. That's important. I'm going to switch cameras here really quick. It's important for this reason right here. So right now I've got I'm going to quit asking you guys. There's too many people for you all to tell me that you can see something. So I'm going to quit that. But everybody can see this white piece of paper here. This has got about a 5,000 K light bulb on it. I've got 5,000 K light bulbs overhead in my shop. I've got this red light bulb, and it stands to reason that if I put this red light bulb in here and I look at this piece of paper, it's going to have a red look to it, correct? Pretty extreme example. This is an actual red light bulb. It's making that red. Ted, is it red?
It's red.
Okay. So that's an extreme example. But imagine that I was trying to touch up this piece of paper with that red light bulb on. It doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? If I was going to try to come up with a white, I would be adding red to my color, trying to mimic what I was seeing there with that red light bulb. subtle examples, especially when you're dealing with browns. If you're adding any amount of red to that color to try to make up for a red light bulb, or in the subtle case, an incandescent bulb. Grab this really quick. An incandescent bulb that's like slightly orangish, you're going to be adding red to that. And that's why when you're touching up under your kind of incandescent bulbs, your kind of reddish bulbs or orangish bulbs, and you go out in the sun and you go, oh my God, this is too red. It's because you were trying to add enough orange or red to get past that level that your light was telling you was information coming back off of the project. Does that make sense?
That's awesome. Ted, didn't you do a cool thing with light bulbs and stuff recently with your red, blue, and green light bulbs?
Yeah, Ted was actually able to make writing on his whiteboard disappear with different colored lights. So, all right.
I have a question real quick.
Yeah.
When you're touching up, do you turn off your main light source in the shop and only use your 500K light bulb to avoid any interference?
So yeah, if I have, I don't have any incandescents in my shop anymore. I got this. I don't know if you can see that, but this is a one of those goes in the whole ceiling tile apparatus, and that's a 5000K light. But basically, I don't have anything under 5000K in the shop at all, because it doesn't take much of that color coming off of another light bulb to give you a false read on what you're mixing to. So I would imagine also that if you were to go up into the like past 6,000 and you were to go into 6,500 or 7,000 where it's starting to get blue, and I would imagine that it would be giving you blue information into your touch up as well.
Yeah, just for the record, if you had an open window that's facing north, that light's going to be distinctly blue relative to your daylight bulbs. So if you're going to be really picky about it, you might want to block the window. Yeah,
if I am being picky about it, I will block my window, because also you'll get red information in the morning and in the evening as the sun's coming down. So the K is pretty important. I keep it between 5,000 and 6,000, maybe 6,500. So let's see here. Going back to the screen share. So in addition to, if you want to get super picky, in addition to the temperature, there's also the CRI, or the color rendering index, which is basically, so you've got the white light beaming down on your project. But how full is the color information from that white light? The CRI is going to tell you how much is actually being transmitted so that it can be reflected back to your eye. If you notice in here, the blue in the fluorescent is a little bit deficient, so it's not going to be giving you as strong of a read as these high CRI bulbs down here. Standard LEDs are pretty good. I personally, the difference between this and a high CRI LED is probably beyond me. CRI was something that I looked at a lot when it was compact fluorescent bulbs, because they were quite different. When you were talking about the difference between this and this, it was pretty important. When you're talking about the difference between this and this, it hasn't been an issue since I switched to LED bulbs. So it may be if you're going to take it a little bit further than I take it, this could be a place that a person could look to up their game just a little bit. So my philosophy on touch up. Basically what we're shooting for in this next step where we're going to be creating a finish schedule is learning about the layers. A lot of times when guys have problems with touch up, it's because they get the layers wrong. And you can get something looking pretty good from head on, and then as soon as you start turning the guitar around in different angles, you get these really, really crazy looks. And so kind of my overall philosophy of touch up is to try to replicate the finish schedule as much as possible. Maybe instead of using pour filler, we're going to be, like if we were touching up, we'd be using dye and pigment, but we're taking into consideration some of the things that make that once we get to the full layer of finish over the top of our color, we're taking into consideration what it was that made that original finish schedule. That way, all of those layers, when we roll them around and look at them from different angles, they're going to have at least a shot of looking pretty good from different angles. So the first thing that we're going to look at, the first layer in almost every guitar repair touch-up, is the wood. And the wood is pretty important. Hold on one second. Sorry, everybody. I messed my knee up and I'm having a little bit of a hard time. So the first thing to consider when doing a touch-up is the species of the wood. Just because you're working on a piece of maple doesn't mean that you're going to paint your way out of a species mismatch if you're doing a patch. So if I'm working on a Les Paul and it's a sugar maple top, I'm going to want to find some sugar maple to do the wood repair in, because trying to paint your way out of a species mismatch is a real it's a real exercise. So the same thing can be said for some of the mahoganies too, like trying to paint Honduran mahogany to look like Cuban mahogany can sometimes be pretty challenging. Trying to paint Indian rosewood to look like Brazilian rosewood, that can be pretty challenging as well. Any questions about the species? Okay. So the other thing to take into consideration with the wood is the chatoyance and the figure. Highly chatoyant wood can be very challenging to touch up. It gets to a point though where wood can be so busy, like on this quilted maple, that it's actually more forgiving because of the figure than a piece of wood that was maybe a little bit plainer. There's just more things distracting the eye. And so in general, high chatoyance can be very challenging to touch up, because if you're adding color to things to try to paint in fake grain lines or something, the chatoyance will look, the shimmer of the wood will look different, and your paint will look the same, and your paint will stick out like a sore thumb. However, if it's got these deep flame lines in there, like a lot of times you can hide things in a fake flame. So chatoyance is that deep shimmery look that wood has. Basically, boy, I'm having a hard time not being able to see people while I'm talking here. So the chatoyance in the wood, can everybody, I can't see what you guys can see. Can people still see me? Or can you just see?
We're on the document cam.
Okay. For this guy. So the shimmer that you see when I'm rolling this piece of mahogany around in the light, the shimmer that you see is the overlapping cell structures of the wood. And basically what's happened is when I'm rolling it around, you're looking into extra little nooks and crannies, and it's giving you that kind of like, well, the term chatoyance comes from the French meaning the cat's eye, and it's giving you that reflective look from different angles. In general, in touch-up, the deeper that look is, the more difficult the touch-up project is going to be. Also, with wood, we have the UV effects on wood. So this is part of the layer. This is super hard to control, and it's another one of those things like species mismatch, where if you're trying to paint to get to the look of the wood that's been affected by UV over time, it's very difficult to make it look good. So some of the things that happen to wood as it's UV'd is it's just like your skin, it's going to get darker. So a lot of times what you have to do is add color. If you're putting a new piece of mahogany in, and it's this, brand new piece of mahogany, and you're putting it into an old guitar, a lot of times you have to darken it with stains and pigments to bring it to the original, or to the color of the original wood. The other thing that happens though with wood is it brings out different aspects of the wood too. So on a piece of spruce that's been hit with UV, a lot of times what you see are darker grain lines, very more pronounced grain lines. You may see the medullary ray fleck like really start to get pronounced. Those things, if you put a top spline in a guitar and those things haven't come out of UV and you've got to paint them in, it looks really bad to paint in fleck or grain lines on a spruce top, just because you've got this highly chatoyant piece of wood that's, everybody's seen spruce, you roll it around in the light and it's got this like super deep, super crazy look. And if you paint a grain line on it, chances are pretty good that grain line is not going to look reasonable with the rest of the guitar. It's going to stay in one position as the rest of the guitar kind of shimmers and does its chatoyant look. One other thing that happens with UV is it does kind of tend to degrade the chatoyant look just a little bit. It tends to mute it. You may have a piece of wood that's like super chatoyant before it gets hit with UV, and just because each one of those little nooks and crannies is getting blasted with UV, it just kind of mutes that shimmer a little bit. That's something to think about too when you put new wood on old guitars. Like a lot of times you'll wind up with a piece of wood that pops harder than the old wood. The other thing to take into consideration with wood is the grain runout. So Frank Ford, this is stolen from his website, but the grain runout is super important because you get different looks from the guitar based on, or from the wood based on the runout. So here is so here's a picture of the runout. Basically, if you had like a piece of wood that was straight on the grain structure here, each one of these little voids here has a little bit of cell structure that runs the entire length of the tree. When you cut it on angle, basically what you're doing is you're cutting through that cell wall, and you're leaving a way for it to send back different light information to you if it wasn't cut. And basically what you see, this is off of Frank's site too, is you see dark and light patches in the wood. So this top is actually what we used to Breedlove call flip top, and the runout is going different directions. So on this one, it's light on the bass side, dark on the treble, and then just by flipping the guitar, it's becoming dark on the bass side and light on the treble. And what's happening is you're actually seeing into that cut grain or cut cell structure. You're looking into the cut, and it's changing that color. So on an extreme example, if I was putting a top spline in a guitar, if it had really crazy run out and I was looking out one way and it was super dark, and then I was rolling it around in the light and it was super light, I would, if I was trying to really A game it, I would go looking for a piece of wood that had that similar run out pattern. So run out is something that I don't take it into consideration a whole lot anymore because it's just too much. But it is like if I was working on a really fine guitar and I was trying to A game a top spline, it would be something that I would take into consideration. The other thing that affects the way that wood looks as you are creating the overall finish schedule look is the preparation, and that includes the sand out. Like, what is this wood been sanded down to? I'm gonna sand these our little pieces of mahogany down to 220 grit. That's not always the way it's done. Sometimes they were, roughly sanded down after milling, and those are going to have a different look than something that's like really hand sanded out. If you hand sand this with the grain and do a nice job sanding it out, and you do it with 220, if you were to do the same thing and do it with a random orbital rather than hand sanding with the grain, you're going to get to a different look. You don't think it's a big deal, but if you're doing a touch up and you're rolling the piece of wood around in the light, like all of just the way those scratch orientations are done up is going to have a big effect on how it looks. So sand out has an effect on the way it looks. The other thing, we're going to include this in the wood part, but if somebody dies to bare wood, that's going to have a big effect on the way it looks. I mean, that stands to reason. You add dye to the wood, which we're going to do on this test piece. It's going to have a big effect on the wood. Looking at an old piece of wood and deciding whether or not it's seen dye in its part of its finish schedule or not can be difficult to determine. One of the things I do is if I'm doing a touch up and say this has finish on it, and I've just replaced a big hole in the center of it, I'm actually going to probably sand quite a bit outside of the area of effect, and I'm going to sand just a little bit into the finish and start looking at the edge around the touch up and see if I can determine whether or not that wood is seen dye. On certain instruments, it's easier to tell than others. Like the Martin dye was pretty subtle, but something like on an S or anything where it's got like a real kind of poppy look, like a Paul Reed Smith or something like that, a lot of times you can tell what's going on just by sanding a light edge into the finish, into the bare wood, and you'll see like it kind of lay out into a transition, and you can tell there. So, and then the next thing that can happen to bare wood before we start putting finish on it, I guess that technically this wouldn't be bare wood, but we're going to talk about it because it's what we're going to do, is pour filler. So any of these open grain woods, if you see a nice flat finish on them over, you can almost 100% be guaranteed that it's seeing pour filler. The other thing is if you see dark little lines instead of like this kind of, not really muted, but not really as dark as a pour filled line, then chances are pretty good that it's been pour filled as well. If you want to know if it's pour filled, once again, like if you're doing a patch or something and you just sand around the patch just a little bit more, you can oftentimes see an area where a pore has been, you've sanded through the pore filler, and you'll see like a little dark streak there. And that concludes the spoken word part of this presentation. That was pretty ramshackle. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? You got to have a ton of questions about that. I feel like I wasn't very clear on much of that. I'm sorry. I destroyed my knee last night. I'm feeling a little out of sorts.
I mean, I guess I'm curious if outside of the context of you've got a ding, you can actually work in an area, like you're describing some of these steps as, sanding back to see whether there's been dye applied to the wood or pore filler applied to the wood. Outside of just looking up factory finish schedules, what other things would you look at to determine that for any given model?
Well,
without mechanically getting into it.
Without mechanically getting into it, I mean, sometimes you can tell by just kind of giving it some hunches about like how you would approach producing that finish as well. Like the first thing that you have to realize about every guitar manufacturer is they're always looking for the fastest way to do anything. So if you're adding steps to something, like if you look at something that has open pores like this, for instance, and you see that it's like got a nice flat finish on it, they aren't going to spray 100 coats of lacquer to get to that nice flat finish. So that's where I would start assuming that it was pore fill. The other thing too is if you were to take a look at that and you're sanding, almost every ding is going to be you're going to have to like mechanically abrade around it. So there is usually some forgiveness in getting mechanical around it. But if you see that it's like a piece of mahogany and yet it's bright red, and you've just sanded a little bit of the finish off, and you don't find any red at all in any of your sanding of the lacquer around it, like there's no layer of red lacquer coming off in your sanding dust, the chances are pretty good they blasted a coat of red dye into the bare wood, because where else is the color gonna be from? So the other thing too is recommend this. Dan Earlywine knows a little bit about this. There's a lot of finish schedules in here. That doing the sleuth thing, like getting online and asking questions about what the potential finish schedule was, is another good thing. I'm always available. You can always ask me what I think it is. There are some things that I don't know. I would have to look up. Like it's been 100 years since I've done a TV yellow finish. But as this is also going to be stuff that we get into a little bit more as we start to touch up these pieces of wood. We'll start going through some of those techniques of sanding back and kind of looking at it, although we'll already know what the secret recipe is on this. Does somebody have another question?
Hey, Ian, I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, I got a question.
Go ahead.
Somebody else talking? Okay. Hey, so when you...
Sorry. You bet. Bye. Oh, I think that somebody want to mute Dan. I think Dan's talking on the phone. Okay, go ahead, John.
Oh, no, you. Okay. So if you got a hole that you're doing, would you kind of take a test piece and do a finish schedule on it and then hold it up to the guitar? I mean, do you, or maybe it's not something as simple as like a Martin or something, but maybe a complex finish that maybe you're not used to. Would you recommend doing that? Is that something you do, or you kind of do a test piece, then you can kind of turn it around and then?
I do. Honestly though, like that thing, like it's only so helpful, because if I was gonna like do something on an old Martin and all I had was brand new mahogany around, I might get to something close, but then you're only gonna know when you're actually on the project how that wood is responding to the colors that you're throwing down. So, but yes, like I do quite a bit of testing off, not as much as I used to, but basically, I would have to think about why that is too. Part of it is I keep things extraordinarily small in touch up now too. Like if I start touching up and I don't like it, I let it sit for a day and then I mechanically take it off the next day. Like everything dries completely before I take it off. So I have, with that level of patience, I have so little risk involved in things kind of getting out of control like they used to. So I don't really feel the pressure to test as much as I used to. I also am pretty in the supplies that I have. I'm pretty confident in the supplies I have. I've been working with the trans tints and the pigments that I use for years now, and I don't get too many unexpected results. One of the things I'd say about the colors and getting to know the colors too, that I didn't kind of go over in the color theory thing, is the color theory is good, but it's only a rule of thumb. Once you start actually mixing this stuff, you're actually getting into a lot of chemistry too, and you can get some pretty unexpected results by mixing dyes together. You can get some unexpected results by mixing pigments together. Pigments more so, because they're actually they're not soluble, they're particulates, and so what you're getting is more of almost like a micro stippling effect. So how those particulates actually add up together to make a color can be unpredictable. The other thing that's unpredictable is what your saturation point is in the lacquer that you're making. Like you can mix something up and have it look pretty good, and if you're over the saturation point, you'll get pigments dropping out at different ratios because they're kind of different weights. And so you may mix up a really nice looking brown in pigments, spray it on, and then have it can even change on the guitar. Like it can change colors on the guitar just because that lacquer is still malleable and stuff is floating around. So I would have to think about, some of that is why I don't do much testing anymore, is because I've just kind of gotten, like a hillbilly physics or hillbilly chemistry sense of the products now. But I would say if you're just starting out and you're just getting used to the products, or you're changing, like if I was to change from the I've worked a lot with the Mixols, but if I was to change to a different product, you better bet I would probably do a lot of mixing before I threw it on an old Martin or something. And I'd throw it on some scrap wood.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions?
When you talk about doing multiple attempts or you're taking off your old work, is there not a element where each time you do it, you're digging yourself a bigger hole, or your reversibility is such that you can do that?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I've come to grips with that, and what allows me to keep things small is I really wait. If I don't like something, I wait for everything to cure off. The thing is a lot of my stuff is done with this shellac, like as a medium, and this stuff goes off incredibly fast. I can mechanically, if I put something on at the beginning of the day, I can mechanically remove it by the end of the day. The other thing is, just so everybody knows, removing stuff with solvents is how things get big. Waiting for things to dry and taking off mechanically is the way. And that really gets down to like if I had a touch up on here and I didn't like it, like I would come back with a small piece of sandpaper and really just kind of methodically, take it off and really like I wouldn't like come in and just blast it off unless it, it was the 10th time and I was getting really angry and I was just, at the end of my ropes. I would really like focus on keeping everything small. With that being said, yes, even keeping it small and keeping it mechanical, like really, you are eroding a little bit each time, so
Well,
but-
that's where your sandpaper and plexiglass trick comes
Yeah.
really, really big and handy.
Yeah. And boy, I'll tell you what, on that sandglass and plexiglass, I mean, I'm a lot of times if I'm doing something and I'm taking it back off, like I'm using a piece of sandpaper that big, and I'm just getting really tedious and getting down on it. So
What's the plexiglass trick?
so I put I'm gonna get a piece really quick. So if I had a spot right there that I was trying to take down, I'd put sticky sandpaper on a piece of plexiglass and then put the plexiglass over it like this so that I could actually see where I was sanding to, remaining flat, and I was keeping my touch up in the same line. That's one of the things that can really give things away, is if you've got a touch up and the surface is at a different angle. I mean, you can see how my hand is changing color in the light there just by rolling around. That's what's happening with your touch up too. If you're presenting different angles, that light will catch it. And even though it's a small spot, it's going to send back that light information to your eyeball, and it's that spot's going to jump out. So keeping everything on the same plane is pretty critical, and this plexiglass tricks helps with that. All right, is everybody ready to do some finishing? How many people are set up to actually do some work right now? Not you, Paul? All right. So for those that want to follow along, I'm going to do this finish schedule really quick. How many people, let's see here. How many, actually, if you plan on following along, can you raise your hand really quick? Is there a raise hand function on here? We got one person following along. All right.
Raise hand is in the reactions if you're looking for it.
What's that?
The raised hand is in the reactions if anybody's looking for it.
I see that. I see 2, 3. Okay. Okay. Who's got port filler? Who's got pumice? How many people have I'm just wondering, does anybody need to see port filler? Can you pretty much guess that port filler is the same as the pumice? Or is kind of the same? I did stir my port filler up today, just in case. Maybe I'll do 2 sides. All right. So everybody grab their paper towel and their shellac and their piece of mahogany. And we're going to spray the paper towel. And we're going to grind that shellac into the wood there. So this is another one of those situations. Just for fun, this side I ground in with the paper towel, and this side I'm going to spray on. Oops, I got kind of let that go off really quick. I don't know if you guys can see that. Let's see here. You guys see the difference between the shot? So this is the shot side, or this is the rub side. This is the shot side. Can anybody see the difference between that? So one thing that happens with the Ted, you're smiling. You can't see the difference?
Ian Pender and I both just made the same kind of like side to side head
Oh,
nod.
okay. So one of the things that happens with the shot side versus the hand rub side is this shot side. It almost raises the grain just a little bit. The hand rub side, when I'm pushing this in, it's actually in smushing in the grain just a little bit. And so what's happening there with the hand rub side is I'm going to get to a flatter finish faster with the hand rub side than I am with the shot side. I can feel that right there. I don't know if anybody has the pieces of wood, but you may, or the shellac going, but spray one side and hand rub the other side, and then feel the difference between the two sides. Some of that's going to be the lumpiness from the shooting, but some of that's actually just by virtue of the fact that that liquid is going in there and it's raising the grain just a skosh, whereas like mushing it down is actually mushing that grain down and getting it ready to go. You also get you probably can't see it on the TV here, but you get just a little bit more chatoyant pop with the hand rub side too. I don't know why that is. Danny, you're laughing now.
Yeah, because Sean's
All
gonna
right.
shoot.
What? I'm gonna do. Oh, you know what? I messed this up. All right, everybody sand their shellac off. I messed it up. We got to dye it first. I'm sorry, everybody. All right. So everybody got their dye?
Is that tobacco?
This is tobacco, yeah. So if you watch the preview video, I'm going to go a little bit darker than the preview video. So I'm going to put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 drops. I'm only going to put in just a little bit of the everybody see that? Just a little bit of the denatured. All right. Give everybody a chance to catch up to that. Danny, you're like my main guy here, and you're smirking. All right. So now I'm going to do the same thing with the shellac. I'm going to hand rub it on. Everybody see that shimmer? Nice and smooth.
Ian, sorry, question. With the dye, is it sort of self-regulatory? Like you just put it on there and it's not going to accept more than it can take, or are you minding how much you're applying?
There is a saturation point. I'm not reaching it with that, but you could put more on there than that. But there does seem to be a level that you're not going to go past the wood accepting. If you wanted to, you could probably take straight dye and test that out. Like it'll still get pretty dark if you throw straight dye on it. But like if like it'll take it up to a certain point, and then if I was to go back with the shellac and do it, like it's going to pull a lot of it back off. Oh, I gotta go get a spoon really quick. All right, so I do this thusly. We're going to do equal parts of the pumice. The true oil. I have a Q-tip to stir this up with. I'm going to add the true oil to the pumice. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 drops of tobacco. Maybe a little aggressive. A nice stir. So just for, I stirred up my pour filler today to get ready for this. And this pour filler was kind of is kind of on the verge of needing to get a little bit of naphtha put in it. I thinned my pour filler with naphtha, but this is kind of what like store-bought old McFadden's pour filler looks like. This is what, it's kind of a different color, but this is the viscosity that this is at. This is the viscosity that this is at. The viscosity really changes the look of the end result too. The other thing,
Ian,
yeah.
would you describe it as the consistency of a condiment for us? Would it be like a ketchup?
Yeah, my wife said the way that you would describe it is like Hershey's chocolate syrup, kind of that. That's a good. You know how like you're like forever waiting for it to go on your ice cream so you can get into the business of pigging out. That's what you're looking for. Frustratingly slow.
Hot or cold?
Cold.
Ah.
Danny knows his syrup. So this pour filler has dye in it. I was talking to Brian from Red Wing, and he was like, "Wouldn't you use pigment in it?" And I think that the this is one of those things where we're kind of doing a little bit of speculating about what original finish schedules are like. But when I look at old Martin backs and sides, their pore filler is like almost kind of splotchy looking. And my hypothesis is that their pore filler was dye based. So basically I've put in pumice, which acts as a particulate, which acts as almost like a pigment. If you look at this, I mean, it's virtually indistinguishable from like almost a grayish pigment, right? So what I have here is basically a pigment and a dye mixed together, which winds up making a very specific look. Now, this is something to think about when later on when we're doing touch-ups. If I'm making a grain line and I'm making it out of just dye or just pigment, it's never going to look like that. This just has a completely different look than a dye or a pigment alone. So getting back to that Martin look too, because this is a dye and because it's, you know, the dye has like a little bit of solvent in it. It's got a little bit of solvent from the True Oil too. How long I leave that pore filler on is really going to change the ending look, because if I leave it on, what's happening is that dye is transferring just a little bit to that sealer coat. It's transferring, it's sticking. It's not crazy. Like if I was to do this to bare wood, it would look totally crazy. Like that dye would really kind of impregnate into the wood, and then you'd be, you know, kind of off to the races with color. But it's going to like transfer a little bit to that. Now, some pore fillers are pigment based, and they're not going to do that same thing. That pigment is not going to, those little particulates of a pigment are going to go and they're going to sit on top of that seal coat, and then they're going to be wiped away. They aren't going to transfer quite like a dye does. So how this looks, and when you look at old Martins and you look at that splotchiness of the pore fill, they put that on. Some days they left it on for 10 minutes after flash. Some days they took it off like almost immediately off flash. But there's a lot of different looks from a lot of different Martins. So, but one thing that's always, you know, like in the older ones, one thing that you always see is that kind of splotchiness, like the dye was being taken up differently depending on how long it had been on in certain spots. All right, so I'm going to take my pore filler. I'm going to start wiping it into those pores. I do it like this too. Like modern manufacturers, they're probably going to put it on. Maybe some are going to put it on with a squeegee. Some people are going to put it on with burlap. I put it on with paper towel. And basically what I'm looking for is I'm looking for like even coverage into there. I don't want to be wiping it off at this point. This, if I start trying to like kind of wipe it in and wipe it off at the same time, I'm just going to pull all of that pore fill back out of the pores. So we want that to sit and go off for a little bit. And actually, while we're doing it, I'm going to do we're waiting for that one. I'm going to do up this one.
Hey, Ian, do you have a paper towel preference?
Paper towels. No, I really don't.
Okay.
I know that if I'm doing CA stuff, like I'm doing a wipe-on finish with Glue Boost, I want the cheapest, least absorbent paper towels there are.
Thank you.
So this one I didn't sand out to 220. Can everybody see how much darker that is? How that's taking up that dye differently because it's got rough saw marks still in it. I don't know. It's a little hard to tell over the camera, but it's a pretty different look. So this one I'm going to do with the pore fill for the pore fill guys out there. pretty different color. I don't know if that's coming through on the camera either, but this is the tobacco brown. So the tobacco brown has a lot of black in it. This is much lighter brown, or not much lighter, but it's a different brown. All right. For the people that are following along, before I bust off to talk to Josh about his touch up with the fill and finish colors, does anybody having any struggles or have any questions about their following along so far? Has everybody got something that looks a little bit like this? See how shiny that is? Everybody good? All right, Josh, are you there?
Yeah, we're here. Sorry, I had to unmute.
That's all right, man. You wanna show your show and tell really quick?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
We're gonna move go back to. Sorry, we're trying to change the view here. We're goofing around. I think that works a little better. Okay, I don't know. Does that seem okay?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yep.
So, what we were doing with the finish, so we started with our pigment, which in this case was our white.
Oh, did we lose you?
There's some
Oh,
dog
there we
hair
go.
in there. So we just had a little bit of the pigment in the cup. So we started a little bit of that. And then let me get use that. And then what we were doing I've tried a couple different things with the whites to make it work. I think at one point they had on their website to mix it with acetone, and that gave some weird results. It got kind of powdery and started not mixing properly. So what we started doing was we had that. We would just add a little bit of the super glue. I'm using the thick, so I just did like 3 drops in there to start. And then we just start kind of mixing it. Linda described it best. It's like when you're cooking with like cornstarch, you just want to do small amounts to prevent it from clumping. And we're going to add a couple more drops.
And then as you moved along, if you need more volume, you can add it later. It's kind of a neat product in that way.
Probably need a little bit more in there. Adding a little more of that. I feel like we're doing a cooking show almost.
And you had better luck with the.
So we started getting it more towards kind of that. It's almost turning into like a paste at this point. So I'm probably gonna add just a little bit more of the glue in there. Couple more drops. Cool, and that looks pretty well mixed at that point. So from here, we were trying to get like an opaque color. In this case, we had that butterscotch we were going for. So where we get from here, after we've got kind of that solid base, we started with a little bit of the orange. I'm just using kind of like a slotted screwdrivers, a little mixer, or to grab some. And we were just using really small amounts of the pigment. Like you really don't need a lot of it in there. So it was just kind of a couple of small drops to start. I don't know how well that's going off.
That looks like a tiny amount.
It was pretty small. That's starting to get a little orange. I'm a little unorganized. Add just a little bit more in there. Okay. Cool. And then as you added more of your intensity, you got a little, I don't know how well that's, yeah.
Yeah, you can kind of
So
see
you got
it.
a little bit more of that
And you
intensity.
can put it on a piece of glass and give it.
Where's the,
And put the white paper. Can you grab a piece of white paper?
no, I got it.
So far, you're just
On the camera, guys.
orange and you're just that orange and the white.
So far, it's just the orange and the white.
But you added brown for the.
And that got us, it was pretty close, but your intensity, it was a little too strong, kind of in that orange realm.
Uh-huh.
So there's kind of the color. And then to dull it, Linda suggested we added a little bit of the brown. And this is where we're just going to add like a small amount. And this was where you could really overdo it. If you added too much brown at the start, it's easier to add just a little bit more each time.
So Linda, you're the one with the art
That
background?
brown knocked down that.
Yeah, that's me.
What's your art background? Did you go to school for art?
No, you know what? I went to school in agriculture and genetics and animal breeding, but I've been painting for 30 years.
Awesome.
Change gears.
Linda's kind of the brains behind our color here.
Not
Awesome.
true. But I do a lot of color mixing with oil paint. So
Are oil paints kind of the same thing where like color theory will get you so far and then you got to kind of like mess around with it until you get what you get, or
exactly.
do the oil
Exactly.
paints stick?
You have to know your pigments. Yeah, exactly. You have to know your pigments because they do respond differently than light.
Lord.
And yeah, I mean, you just need to know your pigments. The good thing about oil painting versus acrylic or watercolor, though, is it's the same color, dry or wet.
Oh yeah.
So when you put it on, it's exactly the same. Yeah. But all the pigments you guys are using are an awful lot of them are the same ground pigments that are in oil paints.
Yeah, they're just
And they have the same weird reactions with each other.
yeah.
And all the earth tones are kind of gritty.
Uh-huh.
So without having necessarily that butterscotch color in front of us, I think I had a little too much brown. So that got us, it's definitely closer to what we had.
Uh-huh. Cool. And I liked you did the thing where you mixed out the glass and put it over the project on glass first, right?
Yeah, so that was just kind of a quick way to test. We saw there's a maker, I saw Stuart Day do that on Instagram. So we've tried that a couple times, doing it on the glass, and then we tried it on some acrylic. And then once we got it kind of close, then we tested with a similar piece of wood to see how that responded.
Oh, it looks really good.
But
that looks amazing.
It looks a little off from.
Well,
we had it closer on. That was our actual test piece.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can get.
But that's the way it
other
goes.
Thing is that. Yeah, and we talked to the customer and he definitely wanted it quicker. So not that it, when you try to label the CA or the fill and finish, it's a little tough. I mean, at some point it always gets kind of that depression.
Yep.
Depresses a little bit, or it's not quite as.
On us.
And so, for a kind of a quick job, and mixing the color, it looked. He was pretty happy with it actually. So
awesome.
Certainly could have been.
So just so everybody knows, this repair that he was talking about is on the forum. So if you want to go look at what he was mixing to, I think it turned out really good. So if you go on the forum and look, it's under the show and tell portion of the Dang Kings. Josh, thank you for sharing that, man. That was that's awesome. I gotta give that stuff a little
for
bit
sure.
more, give it a little bit more of a chance. I have it, but I'm so stuck in my ways on how I do things. It's hard for me to find new stuff. But okay, so
I would definitely suggest trying. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. You would suggest what?
Oh, I was gonna say I definitely suggest trying them in different, essentially forms. Like we were talking about, the yellow changes colors, which I think you were talking about with some of the tints, and just knowing your pigments really well and just how they respond.
And it worked better with the heavier boost, right? Than the
Yeah, we had some issues with if you're using some of the thinner ones, the colors seem to separate a little bit more versus if you're using the thick. But yeah.
Okay, cool. Hey everybody. So you can see this is dull now. These are both dull. So that means the solvents have flashed off. So we're going to move on to the next step. Is everybody's solvents flashed off? Anybody not? I guess I should say, has anybody not got a look that looks like this? Anyway, so the next move is take your Scotch-Brite or burlap, and you wipe across the grain to pull that stuff off. You don't want to wipe super aggressively because you can still pull it back out of the pores at this point. If I was to wipe that with the pores, there'd be a good chance that I pull it right straight back out of the pores, and then we'd have voided pores. But this is kind of the stopping point for this. It's still got like a light layer of the pore filler over the top of it, which I'm going to come back and scuff off after this dries. But this is the look from the True Oil and the pumice, which is actually a really good look. The True Oil gives it like this kind of nice warm glow that the old Martins, you see a lot on the old Martins. So this is the pore filler. This is the old McFadden's pore filler. Is coming off a little bit differently because I did not sand this very thoroughly. But these are two different things, but you can see how dark that is. I don't know if you can tell on the camera, but those rough grain line or rough sanding marks that I left in there really picked up that pore filler. So you can play around with that quite a bit on these test scraps, taking them to different levels of finish sanding. But like when you look at a guitar and you're trying to do like the best job touch up, like how that board was prepped out in the factory is going to have a lot to do with how that looks. And even though you might not take your patch and like rough sand it or whatever, you may look at it and realize that a lot of that color is coming from pore fill rather than the wood, and it may inform what kind of like pigment and dye situation you figure out to paint to, because it's going to be you're going to be replicating more pore filler than you would be replicating the bare wood. Does that make sense? All right. Any questions? You guys are so quiet. I can't imagine that it's because I did such a good job teaching. I was a little scattered today. So I am all ears in the DMs for any questions that you have about this. So just so you know, we're going to be talking about finish next. Once we get back together on the next one, we're going to be finishing this out to like scuffing the remainder of the pore off and getting this ready to clear coat. We're going to clear coat it. Maybe what I'll do is I'll give instructions for clear coating it, so the next one that we get together, we can actually drill holes in these and then start touching them up. But the end goal is we're going to get these built up to be a regular finish, like almost like a Martin looking finish. We're going to drill some holes in them, and then we're going to do some putty fills, putty with paint, and we're going to do some scoopy fills and do some proper like trying to do the wood veneering technique over the top of the holes too. So that's what we'll do next time. Any other questions? Nobody's got a single question. Somebody make up a question just so I feel like I'm.
Would you
Yeah,
do?
put your camera.
Yes. Ian, did you have a question?
Oh yeah, I got a question about the glue boost stuff actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering what the consistency of the white pigment was like because I've been playing around with it and my stuff is like so. No matter what I do, I kind of have to mix it with acetone because if I don't, no matter what I do, it just stays clumpy and it doesn't mix in. And I'm wondering if maybe I got a bad batch because it almost seems like it's kind of damp. It's like really clumpy in the jar.
I've had the same with the yellow of the glue boost yellow, and on the instructions it says about grinding it down if it's clumpy.
Right
and I've tried that, and it still doesn't work. I think it's just a bad batch.
Yeah, mine almost feels like it's moist or something.
Yeah.
You might reach out to Rick. I have a relationship with him, so tell him that I sent you, and tell him that you're having a problem. Like maybe it needed a desiccant in it or something. You feel like it's damp in the tray or in the little jar?
Yeah, it's kind of moist and clumpy, sort of.
Yeah, I don't think that's right. You know, he had a lot of problems bringing that to market, and you know, I like Rick and everything, and I think it has the potential to be a good product, but I know he's having a. Did you get yours recently too? I know that with the pandemic, he's having a problem with his supply chain as well.
I got mine from All Parts a while ago. I think it might have been sitting on the shelf a while. So
yeah.
I
think the fill and finish thin CA is like for what we do is a miracle product. I personally I don't know if you noticed, but I mean, Josh got a good repair off with it, and the reason why I wanted to interview him was because he seems to be a miracle example of somebody using that stuff effectively. So and it probably has to do with.
Are you guys talking about the white only?
Well,
yeah, the other
says
colors
he's
seem to
having a
work
problem
better.
with
The
yellow,
white
too.
seems to be kind of the.
I've
Some
got
of
a
our
bad
other
yellow
ones
batch.
Definitely seem.
Some of ours definitely seem clumpier. I've seen to if you can find one of the big clumps and just kind of, that's where I'll take one of the stirring spatulas and kind of mush it down and break it up into a powder.
Water vessel.
Yeah, when I compare the black stuff I have to the white stuff, the black stuff it seems much drier and there are no clumps at all, and the white stuff it's like a completely different consistency.
We had a lot more
I'll go check
trouble when
mine.
we started the liquid. So if we added a little bit of liquid to the white pigment, we could get it mixed better than if we started with liquid and added white pigment to it. It was really different.
That's right, though. It's different.
Yeah, definitely. Ours are definitely like that too. It seems like the black and the brown seemed finer. The yellow and the orange seem to clump a little bit more. And the white almost has like a fibrous vibe to it. It's almost kind of textured. But we've also had this for a couple of years, so it's possible that it might be just like a slightly different mix now versus some of the older stuff.
I wonder if running it through a
Sieve.
like a really fine sieve, would break it up.
That could be. You know, I'll talk to. Actually, I've got a guitar for Rick over here. I'll talk to him again about it before the next get together, and I'll see if I can pin him down on some maybe, because he's hearing from everybody that he sells it to. I'm sure he's sold that stuff to a lot of people that are, in addition to being upset about it, probably have some really good ideas about how to use it now. So I'll see what he says. All right, everybody. Well, I want to thank everybody for ding kinging. And once again, sorry I wasn't more together today, but if anybody has any questions about what we've gone over or what we're going to go over in the future, once again, feel free to hit me in the DMs, and I'll see you guys all for the next thing. So coming up next week is going to be Lynn Krausen. He's a guy I work with at Gruens, and he's actually got a job being somebody's kind of private luthier for a large personal collection. So we're going to go over what that job looks like, taking care of a rich guy's guitars. So that should be interesting. And then after that, we've got Iris Cars coming up, and I'm going to talk to. I can't believe some of the work she's showing on Facebook. It's crazy. If you haven't looked up Iris Carr on Facebook or looked up her website, I highly recommend looking up her violin work, because it's just nutso. But anyway, I will see you guys all next time.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Ian. Really appreciate it.
Take care, guys.
Bye. See you, brother.
Have a good week.
Use Ian now.